All right, let's do this thing. Come get seated. Come get seated. Let's get started. All right. Welcome, everybody. It's nice to have you here. Folks in the back, grab your drinks. Amanda, wrestle everybody up. Bring them in. My name's Eli Storch. I chair the Design Advocacy Group, and it's nice to have everyone here. This is our May 2024. It's hard to believe it's May, but our May 2024 monthly meeting. Excited to be here with StreetBoxPHL and the CDC. We've got a lot to get into. We're gonna get through some DAG business, but first, as we do when we're in person, gonna go around the room, introduce ourselves. So when I point to you, you're gonna be first in the back there. Yep, nice. Pop up, tell us your name, and because of the topic, your favorite either block or intersection in Philadelphia. We'll go around the room. Start back there. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for doing that and for being here tonight. My block, thank you, Rob. I used to live at Oriana and Wilde, and that little tiny knuckle back in Northern Liberties was lovely. So that's where I'll go. We're going to go around. We have a few announcements, a few advocacy items we want to talk about. If folks have anything, events, upcoming, other items they want to share, throw your hand up. I'll call on you. George, you had a couple things you wanted to jump in with, so why don't you start?
I'm not going to read all these papers. Center City District has released its State of Center City, Philadelphia, which is a very interesting report, beautifully done, very expensively done, I might add. And it's probably only exists in the digital world, so you want to go on their website and have a look at it. It tells us some interesting things, that 84.5% of the storefronts were occupied in 2023. And 84% of the total pedestrian volume has returned to Center City. And the crime statistics are actually slightly better than 2019. That's just some highlights. There's a lot there. It's a good planning report. And I would hope that we can have some good discussion on it. Is there anyone here from CCD to make further comment? Another slightly more controversial item is, you may have seen earlier this week, I guess, headline: Sherelle Parker promised 30,000 units of affordable housing as a candidate. She's watered down that goal as a mayor. So looking for scandal, the Inquirer has come forward. I'm underwhelmed by the journalistic hype on it. Yes, she might have said that. But does anyone here in this room probably is aware of how much 30,000 units of new construction might cost in today's world at $500,000 a unit, roughly? It's not possible in the current world that we live in. And maybe as more politicians realize that, we will get more advocacy for appropriate housing construction in the United States. It's often said that social housing in Europe is actually better than developer housing in the United States. So they had an interview with John Monlack, who was the chief of housing and community development, replacing Ann. He referred to a dashboard. We're going to have a dashboard to tell us how this goal is being met. Well, the dashboard already exists. The city announced a goal of 100,000 units in, I believe it was 2019. And if you go on the internet and search Philadelphia Housing Dashboard, you can look at that dashboard right now today. This is being kept by Catherine Califano, who, as I understand, still has a job in this administration. Oh, really? Okay, the other tidbit I'm going to give, then, so Catherine Califano left. I'm sorry to hear that. Wonderful housing expert. Just a tidbit, more signs point to next big Rittenhouse Square development project. This is the sale of the Union buildings next to Boyd's on Chestnut Street. And I think there's 4 high-rise towers that are at least under some form of discussion in the 19th and Chestnut, 19th and Sansom vicinity. So I'll just stop there.
Just very quickly, Nikhil Saval, State Senator Nikhil Saval, and a coalition of groups, including Philadelphia's Preservation Alliance and Preservation Trust of Pennsylvania, is pressing to get the state of Pennsylvania to increase the ceiling on tax credits given every year for historic preservation projects. Pennsylvania, for the entire state, that ceiling is currently $5 million. The average for the 17 states that have similar programs, the average for other states is $36 million. It's, as they say, a no-brainer. On my knees lining up co-sponsors for this. If you were the state senator who is not Nikhil Saval and would like to write an urge them to support it, do that. Work with the see if Dan will join the group of other organizations that supporting this.
What is the did you say the ceiling is now?
The ceiling is now 5. They're negotiating what to push it up. I mean, I think I've heard in the upper teens that there's been these discussions. Sorry.
On behalf of my friend Steph, I recommend in the Friends of Warden Square Park, in conjunction with Master Watershed Stewards of Philadelphia County, Warden Square Park, 1122, Environmental Excellence Awards by the Governor's Office in the entire state. And this was up with a budget of $510,000. Native habitat gardens. Folks from Cersei Society and water trouble in the city here.
Very cool. Rob.
Has Patty taken the position on the city's bus terminal?
As of yet, you have not seen it on our website, so no. It is one of many things in discussion, and we will get on that. Thank you, Rob, again. So if you have anything else, continue to throw your hands up. A couple other things to talk about. DAG is putting together a wish list for 2026. We had Michael Newmas here in April talking about his role as the 2026 czar or whatever it's going to be. And so we're putting together a wish list of things we'd like to see, small, large, everywhere in between. So hopefully you'll open our email when we send it to you, and you'll be able to fill out a form and send in your ideas, and we're going to publish all of those and maybe start a little bit of noise and energy around those. DAG did take a position of yes on the ballot question that was in the primary. Some interesting contentious pieces on both sides of that discussion, and it did pass comfortably. So we'll see what implementation looks like. You can read about that on our website, along with our piece on the Stadium District, if you haven't had a chance to see that yet. So Marcia, do you want to come up and give us a little update on what's upcoming?
Hi, everyone. So DAG doesn't usually plan its events back to back, but we did this time. Oh, we did also in October. Sherelle Parker before the election, and then David O also before. And we are again now. We're doing this because DAG doesn't want to miss this wonderful opportunity to present this proposal from Penn's graduate architecture students. Brian Phillips, Brian Phillips, who's an architect and a Penn professor, has charged his class with coming up with new ideas, how to transition the fashion center, the fashion district, into a welcoming district by welcoming immigrants and new business opportunities, and to have it be a gathering place. And this sounds wonderful. So this will be next week, May 9th at 5:30. And to augment the panel discussion, there's going to be a wonderful exhibition in back of you in the space to show the different students' proposals. So we hope you'll be here.
Sure. And then after that, on our website, there's also June 4th. We'll be back on Zoom talking about streeteries. So Councilmember Rue Landau is going to be with us, and a couple members of WXY Studio up in New York are going to be down talking about the design work they've done on the streeteries program in New York and some of the things that they've tripped and stumbled and fallen on, and how we can avoid doing the same. So that should be a really good conversation. Again, that's June 4th at 10 o'clock in the morning. So you need to sign up on our website to get the Zoom link. And then beyond that, there'll be a bunch of interesting things this summer. Once I can get Nate Hummel to respond to his email, he's going to come and present the West Philadelphia waterfront. He's been a little busy. So that'll be coming up, and we'll have a chance to really beat him up and ask a lot of questions and get into the details on that. So stay tuned, yes, please, come share.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So there is an event coming up, a Placemaking Weekend International in Baltimore. It's the first week of June, but before that, there will be Placemaking Weekend in Philadelphia from May 31st to June 2nd. It's the weekend. We are inviting, I'm the local coordinator. I'm coordinating this with Placemaking US, which we are inviting a couple of organizations, including the organization today. We have StreetBox to join us and join everyone, the participants, to learn from each other. So if you have a chance to check the website, Placemaking US, and register for Placemaking Weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so let's get into it. We have a really good group of folks here. They're going to come up. As they finish, they'll line up here, and then we can get into some Q&A at the end. So Ariel Ben-Amos, the founder of StreetBoxPHL, is going to take over from me and get this underway.
Thank you so much, Eli. I want to start with a moment of gratitude. I want to take a moment to thank Sam Schwartz and JMT Engineering. These firms have not only sponsored and made this possible tonight, they've been longtime supporters of StreetBox, above and beyond making today happen. I want to thank DAG for hosting us tonight. I remember my first time at DAG when they were at Temple University, and when I got into trouble as a member of the press at the time. So it's really great to be back here speaking in front of the press and in front of you. And I want to thank a lot of people who are here in the audience tonight as representatives of larger organizations or themselves, from the Right-of-Way Reform Coalition, Taya Wynn, who couldn't be here tonight, the Community Design Collaborative, PACDC, the Bike Coalition, Tiny WPA, Hinge Collective, and yes, DAG, for all the support and kind of helping rabble-rouse to democratize access to our most public of public spaces. So thank you for coming and keeping this conversation going. This conversation for StreetBox started 2 years ago. In this room, we spoke to folks from Mantua who talked about the challenges both in stewarding their community and stewarding their streets. We talked with Alex, who will be speaking with us again today, about how prototyping and designs helped create better designs to serve the specific needs of the community. And later on in the evening, we talked with Mike Carroll and from Otis, and Zabe Brent from NACTO to talk about how changes to the municipal MUTCD, Manual Uniform Transportation Code, I'm getting something wrong, suffice it to say that it's an acronym that many placemakers shake their fist at. And we ended that day talking about Chinatown and how Chinatown faced the massive structural, and that's a pun intended, problems with making a place at 10th and Vine. And we've been having this conversation because our streets and our sidewalks are our largest public asset. They comprise a quarter of all of Philadelphia's land mass, 13% of Philadelphia's, 1/4 of all Philadelphia's land is devoted to transportation, just to be clear. 13% of its land is roads, which is well over 650 football fields. And these 650 football fields are 80% of all crashes occur on 12% of our roads and disproportionately impact our poorest and our poorest members of Philadelphia. And that's just not acceptable. It's not acceptable because Philadelphians, above all else, know how to take concrete back for their community. Between 2006 and 2016, there were over 68,000 block parties, an average of 18 a day in Philadelphia, from holidays to serenades. Play streets is an even more radical tradition in Philadelphia. For 50 years, our Parks and Rec department has helped block captains, individual stewards, shut down streets from 10 to 4 and feed poor kids in their neighborhood. There's nothing more radical about that. And all of this is done because of stewards, the people who maintain spaces, transform, advocate for an intersection, taking it from just an idea in a mayoral campaign to an actual state-funded RACP grant-awarded triangle at 23rd and South, right? They steward and maintain public spaces, transform our streets, and we can't create or nurture meaningful public spaces and neighborhood streets until we make it easier for these people to do their jobs. And that's why we're here with you today. We want to celebrate 3 projects that StreetBox and PHL are working on with 3 very diverse communities to create radical public spaces in their streets. And we want to lift up 2 very easy permit typologies that would unlock the ability for more community members to transform more city streets. And so what we're here today to show is that it is in fact possible to radically reform the right-of-way and how we manage it. And now's the time to do it. And it's not because we can't dream big, right? Philadelphia definitely knows how to dream big. Nate Hommel, speaking here today, has a far more modest proposal that will be as impactful as this beautiful swimming pool on the Schuylkill on our hidden river. Right down the street, we're finally going to repair what is a decades-old sin, a travesty of what we've done to our own citizens and to our own city. And we're going to finally cap, and speaking of which, we're also capping I-95. These big moves are transforming Philadelphia's center. Oh boy, I'm being told I have to speed up. Let me just try and be very quick. It's important for us to do that because we must pay attention to our neighborhoods. Drastic changes are coming to our expanded CBD. And while the Parker administration has turbocharged corridor cleaning and promised interventions on every mile of the high injury network, our traffic is getting worse. And by worse, I mean more dangerous and more prone to injury for pedestrians. And parklets and streeteries are disappearing due to changing maintenance appetites and burdensome regulatory regimes. So tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to present 5 different visions for you to help expand and celebrate right-of-way stewardship. Jesse's going to talk about 3 transformative projects that illustrate the need for some of the changes we're going to be talking about. Alex Gilliam is going to talk about how a new permit, which just lasts for 6 months, allows you to unlock much more change by engaging your community. And Nate's going to talk about curb clearances and how a simple fix can radically make our streets safer. I'm really lucky to be joined by Dan Baumick, who's going to talk about what trash data can teach us about streeteries and how to steward them and make them safer. And then JGTZU is going to join us and talk about stewardship at Philadelphia's edges. And I'm saying this because StreetBox has for a long time been advocating and helping to support public spaces. We're helping design and build some public spaces, insure others, and permit even more. And kind of what I'm really excited to talk to you about today, and in deference to time, I won't go too far into it. I'm announcing what DAG, Community Design Collaborative, and StreetBoxPHL are undergoing a new initiative, a steward's guide to reclaiming Philadelphia streets. What we want to do is help create a Philadelphia street furniture census. Precedent, and we need to know what has been designed in the past and what we've approved in the past so we can approve the future. We need to be able to explain in plain language important pieces of code so that average citizens can understand the arcane rules that govern our city streets. We need to give them resources to engage their communities. We need checklists to make it very easy to just walk through and complete projects. Vendor lists. When you talk to a community group, they don't know which insurance agent to call. They don't know where to buy a wheel stop delineator or what a wheel stop delineator or a flexible bollard is. They need plain language and they need to know who to call, and they need shared designs. What we're going to hear about in DAG in a few months about an amazing initiative that New York has done where they prototyped designs pre-approved by the streets department to allow people to just buy off-the-shelf streeteries in New York City. We need those kinds of designs and resources here in Philadelphia. And so over the course of the next year, we're going to start building out a guide, and we're going to be excited to reach out to you more and hear more and get your help in building this together. So I'm going to stop taking the stage right now because I'm really excited to hear from Jesse.
All right, good evening, y'all. Yeah, I'm Jesse Blitzstein with Community Design Collaborative. There's a lot of great guest speakers tonight, so I feel like I'm properly placed as like the opening act for you all. But I look forward to hearing what everyone else has to say. I guess this is a crowd that pretty much knows about Community Design Collaborative, but for anyone who's not familiar, we're a nonprofit. We connect community-based clients and local design professional volunteers, bring them together to work on preliminary designs for neighborhood revitalization projects or to address built environment challenges. Oh, excuse me. I guess my slides are on a timer. I followed instructions that Ariel gave me, but we're working on 3 projects with StreetBoxPHL, like Ariel said, and this is kind of part of the reason why. This is what it feels like sometimes to do a placemaking project in the public right away, if you're a community group and you don't really know what you're doing. Something seemingly simple is actually kind of difficult. These are the 3 clients and projects we're working on right now. We're like midstream with all these projects. Philly House, Science Leadership Academy Middle School, Strawberry Mansion CDC, Center City, University City, and Strawberry Mansion. The Parklet intersection daylighting and pedestrian plaza, they're kind of in quotes intentionally, nominally, those are the projects that the clients approached us about. In actuality, each project has had its own complications that makes it a little more complex than just that. So Philly House, largest men's homeless shelter in the city, not too far from here. They have this sort of, not too exciting space in front of their building. They're working on some interior renovations. That entrance there is going to become their main entrance again. And they want to activate the space in front of their building and make it a dignified space for the guests that they serve, Philly's unhoused population. One challenge to this is last year, the city changed the bike lane and parking structure on 13th Street. So now instead of parking in front of their building, there's a bike lane. But our design team, we're looking at sort of low cost, non-permanent ways, I'm gonna borrow Nate's term, to activate, one option to just activate the sidewalk. And we're also looking at how we can help the client make the case to the city that this freshly painted bike lane could possibly be reoriented a little to make more space out there in front of Philly House and to really create like a nice space where the guests and clients that come to Philly House can rest and hang out. Our intersection daylighting project is at Science Leadership Academy at 36 and Warren. There's actually 2 schools located there, PAL and Science Leadership Academy. And if you can see on the right-hand picture here, it's chaos at pickup every afternoon when the kids are dismissed from school. And that's, what the principal brought us in to talk about or to work on. We have talked to kids at the school. We had like a really cool focus group session where we talked to students at the school and got their feedback on what the challenges are at the intersection and in general with like drop off and pick up at their school. And we did some design exercises with the kids. And, so our team is looking at, like technically what would it take to to daylight that intersection. But beyond that, other challenges have come to light. We're really also, as much as we can without too much scope creep, looking at, what's going on along Warren Street, and even some things beyond kind of like traditional design and engineering with like, what are the logistics of the school's drop off and pickup, which anyone who's parents here might be familiar with the challenges of that. And then our last, third and final project is in Strawberry Mansion with the Community Development Corporation there, looking at the triangle that's made where York Street, Ridge Ave, and 33rd Street intersect. There's already a concrete pad there, and the CDC approached us about ways to activate that, turn it into a pedestrian plaza, think about connections to the park. In talking to the client community, they also want us to think about placemaking and connections to the neighborhood's history. So Henry Tanner House is there, John Coltrane House is there in Strawberry Mansion. So we have been working as a team. We've been looking at local precedents for, kind of like custom built pieces for placemaking. So shout out to Tiny WPA and Hinge Collective, who have done these cool projects in the past, and thinking about how things can be custom built and community can really be incorporated into like art and wayfinding and placemaking. We're also thinking about, these are tough streets to cross to get to the park and to and from the neighborhood. So thinking about how to make those crossings a little easier. One challenge with this project is Ridge Ave and 33rd Street are state roads. So some things are more complicated because of that. So I want to end with this Yogi Berra quote, great baseball Hall of Fame catcher, also, well-known urbanist. In theory, there is no difference between theory and practice. In practice, there is. I feel like that's what we've been finding with these projects, and you find with this type of work. In theory, it seems simple. Let's put some paint out, let's put some planters out, let's put some benches out and make a space, warm and inviting. In practice, it's much, much harder. So there's this question that we'll be speaking to and working on more about how do we make that easier. So yeah, thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time today. I'll also just end with like my family, my favorite pedestrian and future cyclists for this type of work. I like to put myself in other people's shoes, and then I also like to, relate back to my own experience and what matters to me. So I definitely want to see, warm, inviting, fun public spaces for my family and also for other communities in Philadelphia. So thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. How many of y'all have seen this before? Okay, well, for those who didn't raise your hands, you haven't been looking closely enough, or you're not hanging out in neighborhoods with kids and bike racks. Because I have been actually all around the world. This is on Lancaster Avenue, but I've been all around the world. In Taiwan and Berlin, I've seen this happen. Has everyone heard of the phrase from William White, people will sit where there are places to sit? Yeah? Well, kids will play where there are places to play. And one of my other favorite quotes is by Herman Hertzberger, which is that playgrounds are prosthetic for society. In so many words, if we have to make a playground, we have designed our city and streetscapes entirely wrong. So based on this behavior on Lancaster Avenue, which also included kids playing on dry cleaner railings on handicap ramps, doing merry-go-round around parking meters, and of course, playing on bike racks as we see here, we ended up creating about 7 years ago what we would call a playable, sittable bike rack. But the notable thing about this is, sure, we were trying to support play, and play should happen in so many different places. But one of the real driving reasons in creating this bike rack is because it is absolutely insane to try to get a bench installed on a sidewalk or in a right-of-way in Philadelphia. A bike rack is marginally easier. If you have made less than 50 of them, you still have to go through the Art Commission to get approval and apply to the Streets Department, but it pales in comparison to City Council having to write a law to approve every single bench that you have to install in the right-of-way. So this bike rack is also designed to be sittable. Why shouldn't there be places everywhere where people can sit? Bike racks are not used all the time. And how can we sneak them into the public sphere? How can we sneak public seating into the public sphere in the easiest of ways? Beautiful as this is, as much as this is one of my favorite projects, it's absolutely insane at its core. This project, this is one of those projects that took city council, council member actually writing a law, and the entirety of city council voting on it to actually approve its legal installation. These are, this is one of 5 senior benches in Mantua. What is also notable about this project is that by the time, almost a year later, that we finally got full approval for these to be installed, the community had actually decided they wanted them moved in a couple of locations, which actually meant that thousands of dollars worth of time went down the drain. And thousands of dollars more had to be spent to create drawings to get approvals to install them in the place where the community wanted them at that point. With these 2 things in mind, these 2 project examples in mind, I would like to propose that the city of Philadelphia, and actually most cities across this entire country, direly need prototyping policies. 3 to 6 month policies that allow with citizens to actually take action with minimal approval, to actually start experimenting and exploring what's possible in the public sphere and the right of way. So I'm going to give you a couple other stories to explain why. So first off, Tiny WP is pretty unique. Our fundamental method is actually moving the design studio, the workshop, the community meeting, the classroom to the sidewalk, to that place where that thing is being installed. And we do it at the most highly trafficked times of day with community members that are there, that we're working with. So every single feature, this is not one of the most beautiful things we've designed by far. It is actually one of the most functional things, however. If I took the time and had the time to ask you what's different about this bench and what makes this a senior bench, most of you all would point out that there's an angled armrest, which actually allows people to pull and push up. Seniors who have trouble pulling themselves up. There is a pole there, also designed to help people pull themselves up. The angle on the seat is angled up to make it easier to get up. The edge is chamfered and rolled down to prevent compression around nerves on the back of the legs. The seat is more upright to also make it easier to get up. And this side section right here, although this is an older gentleman sitting on it right there, this came out of user interviews, which said that, hey, most grandparents were actually traveling with younger people, and those kids wanted to be able to fidget. They didn't necessarily want to be able to sit forward. They wanted to be able to spin around and have some flexibility, right? All of these design ideas came out in the first half an hour of designing and building on public site. In fact, on top of a rickety bench, which had been installed illegally, and it's a miracle that no one was stabbed in the butt by this bench at some point or another. So all the ideas you saw in that bench were manifest on site in the first 15 to 30 minutes of designing with that community. The reason I bring this project up in more detail is because one of the reasons we need a prototyping policy is not just to create good design, but is to prevent bad design. So simultaneous to that initial prototype coming out like that, right? This lady came up with a monopod and brought this idea of a butt ledge. And everyone loves butt ledges because it deals with the homeless situation, right? Theoretically, it deals with the homeless situation, which is one of the greatest concerns in many people wanting to install a bench in communities. But actually for seniors, a butt ledge can actually be quite comfortable. It doesn't compress the back of the nerves. It makes it easier to get up. You can lean into something. Great. We thought this design was actually going to win. We had 2 parallel prototypes that we tested on site over 3 separate design sessions. What was kind of remarkable is on the 3rd session, when we thought this one, a version of this, a better looking version of that was going to win, there was a funeral in the neighborhood. What that funeral meant was that actually our sampling size tripled. Beyond the normal 30 people we had involved in every single session, we had close to 90 people. And because of the good grace of that funeral, we actually found out that our sampling size that we've been working with tended to veer on the tall side. And if you were shorter than the range for which it had been designed, or actually taller than the range for which it had been designed, it was not only uncomfortable, it was painful. So very quickly, instead of having multiple community meetings and multiple emails bouncing back and forth about what do we do about this on site, all the stakeholders are like, yep, it's out the door. And there it is, happily used. It's not just about bad design, it's about risk. And risk is a complicated topic in any community. On one hand, sure, everyone's worried about someone getting injured, right? But we actually undervalue the fact of concerns like what happens if someone who sits here who shouldn't be sitting here? What happens if it gets damaged? What happens if people use it in a way they shouldn't be? So in this Play Streets mobile play kit that we created, where kids could actually build their own playground on the play streets that Ariel was formerly talking about, communities actually got to define not only what their streetscape should be, but actually got to define their own culture of risk. And a prototyping policy is really good and important for helping communities quickly and collectively figure out what that is. In Camden, many, many years ago, we did a pop-up skate park. This is Will. This pop-up skate park was so successful that the building extended beyond the lot and beyond the area where we were originally allowed to build. In fact, it spilled out into the streets. And a crazy thing happened over a series of weekends when that play and building moved in the streets, right? The teens and young adults started building stuff out there. And at a certain point, we noticed that cars, they were blocking traffic. At a certain point, cars were coming around the blocks and they were seeing them and they weren't quite sure what to do. We thought there might be some yelling. In fact, on occasion there was like, what are y'all doing? But not in an aggressive way. But most of the time it was like, hey, thumbs up, we'll go around the block. So what we quickly were able to find in this community was that there was a human desire and a human interest in working around this idea of a different streetscape and supporting community there. Can you imagine how long a conversation, how many community meetings it would take to build consensus around getting a permit to play in the street? It would go nowhere. And actually one of my favorite points in this project was coming back to a community meeting in the dead of winter, like in the middle of January. It is dark outside. You don't want to go outside, right? Show up at a community meeting. There's Will and Tiff and others, and they hop out of the seat when I walk into this community meeting. They're the only young people in there. And everyone else, I wouldn't say everyone else, there's certain community members like, this project was crap. You know, it wasn't doing anything for the neighborhood. It was taking advantage of the teens. The teens immediately popped up and they're like, you're wrong. This was amazing for us. Crime went down because of our efforts. The site was clean. The police can back our ideas up. We want more of this. So design is actually power. Design is power. And every one of you, I think a large majority of you are designers. Why should you hold all of the power in the room? We need a design and prototyping policy to give more people power, more people to explore what's possible, more opportunity to shortcut those conversations. It is absurd that in our Building Hero training program, where they make benches as a team building and fabrication exercise, that we actually have to go out and install these in guerrilla fashion at bus stops around the city. There are 14,000 bus stops around the city, and in my last count, I think only about 500 of them have a place to sit. Imagine how many opportunities there are for power, for rich learning, for earning and capacity building around every single one of those spaces, if we just gave people the opportunity to do so. At the core of all of this is just how can you say something is wrong or not possible if you've never tried it? In short, how do you know if you haven't tried? How do you know if it's worth investing many, many thousands of dollars of getting steel trash cans and permanent signage installed, going through the nightmare process with SEPTA of actually getting a sign installed on a pole to improve cleanliness in your neighborhood if you're not even sure that people will use the trash cans? You do a pilot. How do you know if a right-of-way should be a place for poetry? How do you know if a right-of-way should be a place for jumping and see if you can jump as high as Dawn Staley can? Or playing chess?
We're supported by a lot of different contributions from major anchor institutions. They wanted to make West Philadelphia better. They're the ones that helped support us, and they're wonderful. We started out with a simple quality of life thing, pick up the trash, take care of graffiti, back in 97 when UCD started. We've evolved to a lot of other things, solving problems for the neighborhoods. So it started with something simple as picking up trash, giving people a sense of dignity and respect for where they live. And it evolved into what could we do in the right of way to make things safer, make things more fun. So we started learning things, this word called sneck downs. Snow, neck down, kind of put together. And so this idea of wherever the snow is, and it's been there for a couple of weeks, cars obviously don't need that. Underneath that snow was all asphalt. And so when we went out and we said, wait a minute, what if we actually just traced where those snowbanks were? Could we do a pedestrian plaza? And the city's like, what's a pedestrian plaza? So back in 2011, this was a new idea. We're like, we think this could work. Let's give it a shot. And so at the top left there, this is 48th in Baltimore. That was a 100-foot crossing on a major commercial corridor with no crosswalk. And so we just traced those lines and we put out paint, planters, and stones, and we reduced that crossing distance by 50 feet. Through the neighborhood, they said, don't let this be a place for gathering, but it's big enough where there could be gathering. It's big enough where we had to really change how vehicles turn around there. We did a lot of studies for all of that. So this was a complicated one, but this is 48th in Baltimore. This is our first one. Our second one was 42nd in Woodland, where we tried to close a slip lane. We got a SEPTA bus rerouted. We put down some fallen trees, tables, chairs, umbrellas. This clearly was a place for gathering. This clearly was a place where we wanted folks to be. And so there was a robust policy to get approval from all the neighbors, because this is a place that could change things. This could make people be loud. This could make things happen in front of your neighborhood or in front of your home. You should getting a lot of this. Pedestrian Plaza program requires 51% of people in that own properties around the plaza to say, yes, I'm okay with this. And when there's a gathering, that makes sense, because this could alter your peace and quiet at home. So I get that. We're okay with doing this for areas where there is gathering. We evolved it in 2016. We did the simple little area. This is 49th and Catherine, where it was a slip lane that people were turning around in, but it separated a tiny little piece of this area called Cedar Park, the actual park. So we closed that off. We did it for pennies. Well, relatively speaking, $13,000. In grand scheme of things, that's pennies. We did experimental things, pilot projects, as Alex liked to say. But this is where we tried and like, wait a minute, we can do this ourselves. The community said, please make gathering spaces, make it so people can sit down. We got all their approval. We did all that stuff. It made sense. Increasingly, we have neighborhoods coming to us saying, we don't want a gathering space. We just want it to be safe when we go across it. So I'm sorry, we iterate on this stuff. We do different things in the murals. Murals can make you slip. So we did slip resistant stickers down there instead, working with a local artist. Again, experiment. Year 1, year 2, year 3, we call it. We don't always try and hit a home run that first year. We experiment, we iterate on that. We talk to the folks. What do you like? What do you dislike? What could we add? What could we change? And so that's how we're always evolving this thing. I'm going to sit on this for a little bit. This is what we've discovered in the last couple of years. So when neighbors say we want safe crossing distance, particularly at schools, where there's incidents, where there's kids that are getting run down by cars, or there's horrible things that happen. This happened to be 43rd and Spruce, right by Penn Alexander School, one of the most dangerous intersections in University City. There's lots of topography issues there. The neighbors were trying for years to do something and nothing happened. So it got to me like, you should talk to Nate. And I was like, hey, I can help out with this. And so I was like, hey, what do you want there? And like, we just want it to be safer to cross the street. So I said, okay, well, let me try this. And I do believe I have cracked the code on this. I don't want to put my foot in my mouth because we're like one step away from getting fully 100% approved for this, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be. So what we decided is, if this is not a place for gathering, if it's just a place for reducing crossing distances, what if we didn't cause too much trouble? We didn't radically increase the size of this space. We just said, what does the city already give you? It gives you 7 feet off the face of the curb. So if you can just extend that curb 7 feet off the face of curb, you're not changing anything. We legally, there's this crazy term in Philadelphia called culturally accepted parking spaces. So even though they're illegal, they're culturally accepted, Nate, and you have to accept them. So going with the legal rule, you cannot park within 20 feet of a crosswalk. And so we experimented with this. What if we just did 7 feet off the curb, 20 feet off the edge of the crosswalk on 4 corners, and we just have a couple of little things in there to make this safer for crossing. I looked at crossing distances and strides. I'm 6'4", so my stride's 3 feet. Not everybody is a 3-foot stride. I'm figuring little kids' stride is 2 feet. So when we reduce this, you might say it's only 7 feet on each side. That's 14 feet reduction. That's 7 less strides those kids are taking where they could be impacted by a car. That's significant. That makes a difference. That is a big change, even though it's just 7 feet. And so when we had this, we had to still go through that same process of getting 51% approval from the neighbors when we're not taking away any legal parking spaces. We're not changing the turning radius of the street. It's not making it more dangerous for emergency vehicles to go on there because it's the same radius as that existing curb. I had a hunch this would work. And so it took 6 months. I promised the neighborhood group, don't worry, I'll get this done in a couple weeks. And 6 months later, I think we're there. But I believe this cracked the code. And I think because this cracked the code, I think the code needs to be changed. I think we need to have 2 separate systems. So I'm calling this this needs to be workshopped with the name, but a non-permanent sidewalk extension. And so when you are just doing a non-permanent sidewalk extension, you do not need to get 51% approval of all the property owners around there just to do this little thing. You're trying to make it safer, especially in vulnerable areas with vulnerable users like around schools. And so if this is the case, and you're not doing anything to fundamentally alter the streets, it's also a phrase I like to use, reversible. And so if this is a disaster, it can be reversed like a Band-Aid, pulled off, and it goes back the way it was. You're not permanently changing anything right away. If it works, then you can go on doing that. And so what I would like to see is something like this, a non-permanent sidewalk extension, be a by right situation. If there's not a hydrant there, there's not issues that are obvious things, sort of similar to how you install a street tree or a bike rack, these sidewalk extensions should be there. This is common in New York, in Hoboken, in lots of other places where they're just trying to make it safer for folks, trying to make it safer for the folks crossing the street, not make it terribly difficult for the people driving, not radically alter it for those folks, making it work for everybody. And so we're really close to doing this. It's 23 planters, a bunch of flex posts, some paint, and that's it. That's all that it is. We're doing this for, I think, $25,000. The community is raising the money to do this. So this is not massive infrastructure change. This is something that neighbors could raise money for. We should make it easier for them. UCD is a privileged organization. Not every place in the city has a UCD. So I would love to see if there's more by right situations where we can do simple sidewalk extensions that make make our streets a little bit safer. But at the same time, they're not really altering anybody's they're not changing your way of life. This is not someplace where you can hang out, where you could be drinking and yelling and screaming. This is just like a sidewalk. It's not really much different, but you reduce that crossing distance and it makes it a safer place for people to be. It also alerts drivers that there is something here, maybe I need to pay attention. So my point is, I am taking this as low-hanging fruit. Near a school, on the high injury network, I want to work with every community group in West Philadelphia to try and get more of these in their neighborhood. And I'll work with the system, Justine knows this. I'll work with the system on how it all is set out, but we want to change, and I would be happy to talk to anybody about why we want to change it and what could be done to make it more efficient. But that's it. So come out to 43rd and Spruce in like a month or two when we're going to have this out there. Unfortunately, it's not going to be before the school year ends, but we'll do our best. And I'll leave it with that. Thank you.
Hello, hello. Hear me okay? Alrighty. You've heard from a few good folks here, more experienced and more engaged than a lot of folks. I'm just a staff engineer, so this is kind of like having a Pop-Tart after the sirloin steak or whatever. But bear with me. I'm a staff engineer for Sam Schwartz, and I do crash analysis mainly for NJDOT, a lot of stuff across the river. So when I got this opportunity to speak, I thought, what combines what I like to do, this crash analysis, with right-of-way issues? And I thought streeteries would be a really topical and good example, right? Not a lot of contention about it, probably. We'll see. In the middle there, if you're curious, that middle picture is Winnie's in Manayunk. That's good to think about because this is one of the 20 licensed streeteries according to LNI data. So let's start up. Okay. A little bit of context. I'm going to guess a lot of you know about this, but COVID begins and restaurants want to make a little bit of money back with having outdoor regulations. Streeteries become extremely popular, not just in Philly, but especially in Philly. There are almost 800 during the peak of COVID, and these provisions that allow for it end at the end of 2021. This one you're looking at on the screen right here, Bar Bonbon, is currently not in operation to my best knowledge. If it is, it's illegal. This one, I forget the name of it, but it was in Northern Liberties. Just as an example, there were streets that had crashed things. One of the obviously evolving narratives was that if things are in the street in the public way, there will be crashes and harm. The people in this room, obviously, we have a lot of perspective and interest towards sharing public space and public right of way. I'm born and raised in Northeast Philadelphia. No one up there thinks that way. Streets are for cars, and you people need to figure out the rest on your own time. Just kidding. But basically, this city started allowing for people to apply for permits, and really many restaurants, for various reasons, found it very difficult. And when I checked L&I 3 Saturdays ago, there were only 20 that were currently licensed by the city. And I think a few of them, their licenses are expiring even this week, if not next week. In any case, traffic safety is certainly a recurring issue. Here, these are the 20, because what I'm curious to ask myself and ask with you in the room is we can't know every single scofflaw or operating street in the city, but 20 is a good number, 20 is a solid number, and it is backed up by the L&I data. So as you can see, it's a good representation of Center City and a pretty good smattering up there in Manayunk. We're pretty close to the one called Yakitori Boy, great karaoke bar. But as you can see, this is a pretty typical spread of Philadelphia bars. So I was curious about, what does data tell us? This is what I can tell you the commissioner for NJDOT, seniors are extremely interested to know about. It's all about liability, safety, how people come together, and mostly how neighborhoods can develop, which I know a lot of folks are interested in. So without taking a stakes view, what does data tell us, if anything? Maybe it's useful, maybe it's not. Let's find out. This should only be about 2 more minutes of your time. So this right here on the screen here is a screenshot of a typical PennDOT crash map. These crash maps are excellent. Philadelphia has a lot of great resources with the high injury network mapping. For me as an engineer, this is what our typical tool to use. Anybody can look this up though. It's very easy and friendly, user-friendly to use. I picked crash years of 2017 to 2022. Why? Because that's 3 years before COVID and 3 years during and post-COVID. 2023 data is not even out yet, unfortunately, but they will be out shortly. In any case, I asked myself, so there's no uniform way to talk about the crashes. Let me, in good faith, say if a crash is on this block, it's mid-block, say. I'll pick crashes that are on the segment or at reasonably near the intersection. I'll consider that my crash data, right? So we're talking about 20 locations, only 20 locations as we go through. You're looking right now down South Street. Bob and Barbara's is on your left. That is one of the 20 licensed streeteries. It is still operating today, so far as I can tell. And what this data told me as I came through and started just compiling it, most of these roads were considered principal arterial by FHWA classification or minor arterials. This is one of the things that PennDOT considers a minor arterial. You've all been on them. I won't belabor it. Many of them were 36 feet wide. That's mostly because the Manayunk part of the data would kind of push the widths out because that stretch of Main Street there is 2 lane. As you can see, a lot of downtown Philly is 1 lane or it's just 1 travel lane shoulders. Pretty typical for the data. That's what I thought it would be. Most speed limits 25. A lot of people go into things about like lower speeds are safer. I can tell you, New Jersey, lower speeds are not necessarily always safer if you don't combine with the right countermeasures and alertness of all traveling bodies involved. ADTs between about 8,000 to 9,000 ADT across the various 20 locations. Pretty good walk, transit, and bike scores. So we're seeing in general, the licensed locations were in places that are generally considered walkable, travelable, 7% truck traffic, a little higher than some segments, but pretty reasonable, all things considered. There was a very predictable pattern, was that I saw decreasing crashes in my 20 study locations going into COVID and a spike after COVID. That is what everyone across the nation, I'm sure you've heard about this by now, saw that COVID for some reason increased severity while there were less drivers on the road, and post-lockdown procedures actually brought up the numbers. I'm gonna start moving along. More fun data. It's always good to see your thoughts confirmed. There are more crashes on weekend days. There are more crashes in warm weather. And for some reason in the post-COVID period, there were a lot of crashes in the morning. I don't know why that is. I suppose it's because of deliveries. I hope it is. But in any case, they dropped after COVID. There's a lot of things that were good about these 20 locations in terms of crashes. And overall, we'll get to it, but you're seeing there's not a lot of high severity because in general, we'd rather have 10 fender benders than any one serious injury. That's the whole idea of safe systems approach, of vision zero approach. What I did see and what was interesting is that the purple there is after COVID. So if you look at the top there, angle crashes went up and hit a fixed object crashes went up. Because I don't have these police reports, I can't tell you, and I'm not going to try to tell you that they were because of parklets or because of streeteries or anything like that. It simply shows that these types of crashes went up from the data, and that is what you would expect to see if something was happening. So that top right graph there, that's really the only important part of this presentation. The rest is kind of like just fluff, to be honest with you. But I found that very interesting. Intersection or non-intersection crashes. Most of them were not intersections, of course. That's because they're mid-block, they're on segments. That's fine. That's fine. Yeah, as you can see there. Weather, this is again consistent with what I've seen again and again. Most crashes that do happen will happen on a clear day, dry conditions, sunny, relatively warm out. They tend not to happen in worse weather conditions. It's actually when people are less cautious when these things occur. Most of them did happen on the roadway, which is what you want to see as compared to roadside or in a parking lane. That's a good thing to see. I'm happy with that. Again, hit parked vehicle went down. That's good to report, but it hit some sort of fixed object. Fixed object means any kind of thing that is set in the road. That could be a fire hydrant. It could be a permanent piece of furniture, or it could be like a guide rail if you're on a highway, but that's what a fixed object means. Alcohol and aggressive driving related actually went down after COVID. Again, this is a good thing to see because many people, again, have the narrative that, oh, people drinking and eating in the street, that's dangerous, blah, blah, blah. This data at least shows it doesn't necessarily have to be so. It, in fact, is less risky in the post-COVID period, which is encouraging. So to kind of wrap up this thing, you're looking at the 20 bars, or 20 streeteries, I should say. Of these 20 streeteries, 4 of them did not have any crashes associated with the area they were on. You can see them there. JD McGillicuddy's, Jerry's, Wilder, and Goatsbeard Manayunk. Of the ones that did, the green columns, of course, are the post-COVID period. And again, these are all relatively minimal crashes. We're talking about, at most 5 crashes over a 6-year period. This is not by any means, extraordinary in any sense. But for the fun of it, I'm picking Fiorella Pasta. I guess there's a few South Philadelphians here today. All right, we're gonna pick on Fiorella Pasta because that one I was interested to see had no crashes before the COVID study period and had at least 2 afterwards. So I was just curious to think if there was any kind of thought experiment we could have. And here's pictures of the location. The bottom left there is a screen grab from 2019, I think it was, anyway, before lockdown. You can see the way the street looks there. It's not particularly wide in the traveled way. You do have parking on either side. It's a typical South Philly street, right? And then the 2 pictures on the right side are with the streetery involved. You can see all kinds of new behaviors happening because there is a streetery. Because just because the streetery is made well doesn't mean other people make unanticipated choices now. You see that Samuel and Sons truck is now utilizing the crosswalk, obstructing sight distance that would come into the intersection, creates a downstream problem. You can all imagine why. The streetery itself in that bottom right picture, very nicely constructed. It looks like a nice structure. But my first thoughts as a traffic engineer looking at it are that this thing's not particularly bright. It would be dark at night. It doesn't seem to be protected at all by any kind of barrier. There's nothing that as a driver, if you were traveling at some speed or perhaps traveling at some height, that you might not accidentally bump into it. These are the kind of things that, as simple as they sound, are statistically the things that will avoid fixed object type crashes, or in other words, lane departure type crashes. You're aware that you're in your own travel lane. You're aware there's an object to your right, to your left, in front, whichever else. It matters to be visible. And even small casual changes on behalf of, on the part of the city or the owner can make substantial differences in crashes. And again, I'm not saying Fiorella actually had crashes. I just know that his crashes went up and that this looks pretty, not done yet. So, okay. Looking at these standards, and I know there's been, Rue Landau has been making some changes right now in city council, and there's some news about that. This picture on the bottom left here is another one of the licensed streeteries. This is Flannel, again, I think in the South Philly area. This is actually taken when they're trying to set up their thing, but this is an example of the right idea. They're defining their space. They're using an approximation of Jersey barriers or the Jersey barrier shape. They are brightly colored. It is defining the space that will make it safer for both motorists and people using the streetery. These 2 pictures you see here are part of the streetery design guide released by the city. And this is our idea, which is to say engineering idea, of a good and protected streetery. It's not enough that it function and create space. It also has to induce behavior both on the part of motorists and non-motorists, because we need everyone to act in concert with each other, so to speak. So looking at this data, my main thing to give to you is not for or against streeteries. I'm certainly for them personally, but my main thought to give to you is that this kind of data is extremely easy to access. It's fun to look at. I encourage everyone to go home, type in your home address or your favorite bar, your favorite whatever, any kind of place that is of interest to you. Go on PennDOT's crash information website tool and look up the crashes in your own neighborhood. It's a fun way to educate yourself, and any kind of claim, it's better to always talk about it using data rather than narratives. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right. My name is JJ. I'm a massage therapist and artist, a block captain in West Philly. Up until 2016, I thought I knew the city pretty well. I was the lead artist on the biggest piece of public art in the city, which you might see the mural on the side of the parking garages at the airport. And then I went and walked around the city. And when I say walk around, I mean around, as in the perimeter of this city. And so I want to talk to you about what it means to explore the city, to think about it. You know, when we all talk about our favorite blocks, we tended to pick the blocks closest to ourselves. I want to revoke my voting from my own block and tell you that the 5800 block of Newtown Avenue in Longcrest, I didn't see anyone talk about Longcrest, the 5800 block of Newtown Avenue, which is, oh, I can't point to it. It's way up there near Tacony Creek Park and Cheltenham Avenue. Their alleys, go there and discover their secret magic alleys. I'll invite you to walk around there sometime. What does it mean to think about the city by its borders, by its edges, not just by its tourist destinations, but also maybe by its waterways, its water treatment plants, its super fun toxic waste sites that are rarely advertised. If you happen to be on Penn's Landing by Independence Seaport Museum, you'll see this trail sign that invites you to go a little further, to not just walk up and down Penn's Landing, but what if you go 100 miles that way so that you come back from that way? What might you encounter? And what does it mean to invite neighbors to walk with you? To not just cross paths with people you might not cross paths with, but to share a path with them, to walk maybe 5 or 6 hours with them, side by side, navigating obstacles together, to find your way around the edge of the city. This project has grown a lot in the last 3 years, from a little personal tradition to a citywide program that's got about 1,000 people plugging into it. We do the whole perimeter twice a year in February and September. It's been exciting to see elected representatives plug into it. It's been exciting to sort of do some ancillary programming, getting people thinking about what is this city. If you're interested in making your own map, we'll be doing this at Cherry Street Pier this Sunday, free workshop. You're invited 3 to 5. We've been doing some online programming, been facilitating some retreats. If you have any organizations or groups that you'd like me to come in and lead around the edge of the city and talk about it. And this is our second trail sign you'll find up at Lardner's Point Park. Look for more of those coming around. And exciting to sort of get people to think about their city, not just again from the center core, but in terms of the vast richness that it contains. Ariel asked me to talk about stewardship at the city's edges. I want to tell you about one particular day, one particular walk that happened on this past February's walk, where we walked from Cherry Street Pier upstream following the city's border. We'll do a short segment of this Saturday as part of Jane's Walks. This weekend is all the Jane's Walks, so there's walking events happening around the city. A free walk from Cherry Street Pier up towards Graffiti Pier Saturday at 4 o'clock if you want to join me. But on this day, we were going further. We started at Cherry Street Pier, and we're already starting with a special thing here because of our group of 18 or so walkers. 5 of them, a bunch of people are paying on a sliding scale, pay what you wish donation basis to this thing. 5 folks are doing it for free and getting $200 stipends each to help support their participation. We made it more accessible for some neighbors from West Philly and from Kensington who might not have the means to just come hang out and do this kind of adventure. Because in the city, we know that like just walking around the city you live in sounds pretty straightforward, but in the poorest big city in the US, it's not accessible to everyone. As we head upstream past new developments and old industrial zones, into Graffiti Pier, through the wildlands north of Graffiti Pier, and the industrial lands beyond there, we come out onto Lardner's Point. Nope, sorry, not Lardner's Point Park. This is Pulaski Park, a tiny pocket park in the midst of some industrial zones just south of the Tioga Marine Terminal. And here's how this place gets transformed, because Jolie Chilak, who's an artist and also one of our walkers, who didn't actually walk this time around, she walked last September. She was waiting there with her mother, who is celebrating her 81st birthday, who chose to celebrate her 81st birthday sitting with her daughter and her 2 grandkids, waiting in this middle of nowhere tiny park for a group of walkers to emerge from the wilderness to welcome them with hospitality and snacks. We've been building a trail angel culture, a little bit like on the Appalachian Trail, where another way you can participate in this project, if you're not sure about going on a 5 to 6 hour trek through the remote wilderness of the corners of Philadelphia, you can just show up and have snacks for us, and we'll gladly accept that. And so Jolie was reunited with some people that she had walked with in September. This is the community building is happening that's sort of activating the margins of the city and turning them all into spaces that become more significant to us. You know, I really used to think about the city in terms of the center and my little neighborhood. And now by walking through it, by sharing these experiences around the city's edge, by building relationships and points around the city, my sense of the vastness of the city and appreciation for its complexity has grown so much. So as folks who are engaging communities in pedestrian questions, parts of the perimeter are very walkable. Some of them, Riverfront North is building us beautiful new trails. There are plans for new trails. Some of them are very much not so, not designed. So we get to experience all of these questions. From here, we go a little further up, and all of a sudden State Rep Joe Hohenstein has gotten the Philiport people to give us a tour of the port. And so this is my 13th time this February walking 100 miles around the whole city, 120 actually. And it's not till the 13th time that I get to see this unique perspective of the skyline that you really only get if you work at the port, which was spectacular. And this is what happens with repeating investments, with continuing time, with building relationships. And you know, as you can see, new friendships are being formed through this experience. So this project is, Walker in Philadelphia has done a lot in the last 3 years. It's mostly just me as a little labor of love, trying to share the very privileged experience I had through an artist residency in 2016 of circumnavigating the city on foot and trying to share it with others. As far as I'm concerned, while the walk's done a lot in the last couple of years, it's not going to be successful until the participant pool represents the city's demographics, and anyone who wants to undertake it can, and that we have accessible programming for folks who might not want to walk the whole border. But actually, our oldest participant at age 94 went out to different points around the perimeter and explored them, driven by his daughter. So there's a lot of ways to plug into this exploration of the city's margins. I'm now at a point where I can't take on the entire city on my own, as much as I can try to do the splits and bend over backwards for it. And so I'm actively looking for funders and sponsors and project partners. So if you think of any way that your organizations would like to plug in with us, I'd love to talk to you. And I left a couple little maps by the door. And I also want to invite you to join us in walking. I'll be walking in West Philly for the 11th annual Sojourner Truth Walk, which is raising money to facilitate summer camp experiences for young women from West Philly. Again, this Saturday is a Jane Walk on the actual perimeter, along with the printmaking workshops. And we'll do a Cobbs Creek Walk in West Philly the following week for Love Your Park Week. And I invite you to join us for the actual full perimeter. You don't have to do the whole thing. Pick any segment that fits your schedule, which we'll do, or even any partial segment. I'm happy to consult about accessibility and or ways out. And I will direct you to the website. There's also an Instagram, but the email list is the best way to find out about the walk. And with that, I'm done because we have a lot of other stuff to talk about, and I don't want to take more time babbling about this. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. My name is Amanda. I think the idea to be able to prototype and experiment is fascinating. To some extent, that's what you're all doing. You're testing, refining, iterating. Can you talk about whether that's been received in any way, if there's a path, what that might look like? Thank you.
I think that's partially a question for Ariel, but yeah, I think people realize the process is a bit broken, and everyone's sort of equally frustrated about it. I mean, the bench thing, though, I think there's a little bit of kindness that needs to be put back towards city officials, in the sense that the reason that process exists is there's no singular issue you can just wipe out, right? There is councilmatic prerogative, which is about councilmatic power. Right? There is about an understaffed streets department and the city stopping or ceasing to ensure benches in the right of way. Right now, if you're a CDC or an organization, technically you have to hold insurance for those things. I think I said understaffed streets department. And then one of the issues they'll tell you right off the bat is that they had this proliferation of these advertising benches that were popping up all over the city. that they decided were a scourge, and the only way they knew how to deal with that situation was to pretty much shut the door on everything. So, you know, it's a multi-headed hydra to try to wrestle that to the ground. And I'm not sure if we can fundamentally change that singular policy, but I think, you know, there is space within that prototyping, that test period, that pilot project idea to get stuff up. And obviously, you know, like depending upon what part of the city you're in, you know, you put something up and it's only supposed to be up for 3 months and it's up for 5 years. Whether it was designed for that or not. Yeah, Ariel, we've had some good feedback or interest in.
We're taking this as an opportunity to amplify these voices and have it see more about this issue out.
I mean, I think broadly speaking, it is not an issue that's limited to the right of way, right? It extends into how we deal with our schools and how we deal with our public spaces and, you know, how we deal with testing out new ideas. And there have been all of these, like coming out of the organizational age, there have been all these reasons to shut the door and to limit things. But now we need to find, like we've overstretched, right? And now we need to find out what that new reality is. And in a lot of the communities we work in, you know, the people who show up on a different non-sort of governmental level, the people who show up to community meetings are the people who have the privilege to show up to community meetings. A lot of times those are older folks. There's nothing wrong with older folks, but they fought the long, hard fight in the neighborhood. And decisions that are being made about what happens, you know, on a block corner are being made in the basement of a church on a Thursday night. And there's a whole other audience that may have the same view or may have a different view. And we need, like by prototyping, you expand that audience. By doing that in the right way, you expand that audience and that voice. And a lot of times what we hear is that those older, wiser folks, you know, they've seen so much, of the only ones who've held on in some communities and fought the hard fight. But the risk for them is continuing to be alone in dealing with an issue. So part of that prototyping policy, the goal of that is to help them not feel alone. Like, look, there is this wider audience of people who are going to have your back, right? And who are a part of figuring out what is the right solution for now, not 3 years ago, not 5 years ago, but now. And in almost every situation, we've seen that work, but there can be a challenge, just to be clear, about sometimes melding a really young voice and an older voice in sort of finding the right solution. But I think, like, our fundamental mantra at Tiny WPA is make it real. Like, we all, even those of you who are designers, like, we all make better decisions when things are real, when they're at full scale, when we're not having to make abstractions. So even like pilots for a couple of weeks, I mean, just as an idea, can be hugely beneficial.
Sorry. I was just curious, we as Philadelphians tend to look within ourselves and within our specific small communities. What cities have been figuring this stuff out in some ways? What, getting beyond the political, getting beyond the planning aspects of it? I mean, where are some of the good ideas coming from nationally or even internationally in terms of, you know, modern American city life?
With respect to daylighting and other things, the most unexpected place is Hoboken, New Jersey. Hoboken, New Jersey has gone from a crazy traffic-dominated place. If you haven't been there in a long time, it's just unbelievable. There's just these non-permanent sidewalk extensions everywhere. There's traffic calming everywhere. They've basically eliminated pedestrian deaths from the whole Vision Zero goal is to reduce pedestrian deaths from vehicle crashes. And they've done it. And they're an unexpected place that has always felt like second fiddle. So the thing with Philadelphia is we're not the brightest star between two very bright stars, DC and New York, right? So we always think like, oh, woe was us, woe was us. Nobody feels quite that way like Hoboken. And they're like, screw it, we're gonna do this. And it was basically one planning director Bianca Patel, she's fantastic. And so you can do these things and it's not that far away. The examples that people always like to go to, Paris, Copenhagen, Amsterdam, those get laughed out. You get laughed out of the room in city officials here. I've found that over the past, if you go through Chicago and you reference Chicago, that works really well. Reference New York, they laugh you out of the room. Like, yeah, that's too big. We're not that. But yeah, there's wonderful things happening in small communities. Someone just telling me here recently, Cincinnati has this wonderful adaptive parklet program, streeteries program. And who would have thought Cincinnati, right? So it's wonderful that this is happening in so many places. I think with the sort of advancement of social media, these ideas are spreading fast. So I went, before the pandemic, I was always the one, the blonde hair, blue eye guy going into neighborhoods saying, hey, trust me, this is a pedestrian plaza. Here's what it is. Here's what we're trying to do. Since the pandemic, people are asking me, people are saying, could we have a this? That's a profound difference. When someone is asking for it and you're just helping solve that problem, it's great. So I think citizenry is becoming more educated and that's wonderful. But yeah, Hoboken, get up there. Yeah.
That's a great question, and that's an awesome answer. So as a born and raised Philadelphian, I wanted to get interested in this kind of engineering and planning. So my company's office that I'm hired out of is Jersey City, which is about like 3 seconds south of Hoboken. And to your point that you were making, you know, it does feel like a bit being on a different planet because Philly in many ways is car-centric. It's motor-centric. We have the boulevard. We have so many big thoroughfares. We have 76, 95. One of the things to chime on to what Nate was saying was that it isn't necessarily because they see light that we don't see or because their brains are bigger in some capacity. They responded to their own needs because of the way their land use was, because of what the land use allowed and did not allow, and what the needs were. Sometimes the needs were a lot of folks who frankly could not afford a car or couldn't afford a car plus their rent, or didn't have a cause to go from this region to that region. They wanted to move in smaller spaces. So a lot of times the path towards finding more complete streets things, we would say perhaps, or parklets or all these things, is recognizing the need where it already exists. You know, you could take the principles of Hoboken and apply it in Northeast Philly or Southwest Philly. It's already there, but it's communicators and advocators who connect that gap. And again, to Nate's point, you don't necessarily have to go up and down the coast or like the San Francisco or Chicago. We could talk about even small parts of Bucks County or Montco or Delco, where even though they didn't, you know, have a fire under them to do complete streets type things, they simply respond to their needs. So the real thing is, if you were like a 16-year-old, do you really want to spend the money for a new car? Would you rather have a scooter or a bike? Would you rather walk or take the train? Find the people where they're at in terms of their economic and demographic positioning, and then create responses to it, and that creates the spaces for it. So.
It's a good question, and to piggyback off of some other things said, there's some cool projects happening in Baltimore. I can't remember the name of the organization, but there's a organization doing a lot of cool asphalt artwork that I think takes an approach like Alex does, really trying to like incorporate community into the placemaking process and doing stuff with people, not just like 4 or 2 people. And then I also recommend looking up Bloomberg Foundation has like a whole asphalt art like program, and they have a really great website that has examples from not just all over the country, but like all over the world. So some really cool stuff you can see there.
I might piss a couple people off in saying this, and I apologize if I do. But a really simple thing is like parking day needs to be more. Like parking day is performative right now. It should actually be needs driven. If you put all that energy, like, okay, it's cool, we moved on, right? Like it's not about a performance anymore. People don't really, yes, there's a little bit of joy you're providing, but what if you were actually making a bench at a bus stop where it's needed, right? And chaining that up and bringing a little joy to actually a place that's needed. Siphoning all that energy or directing all that energy into the myriad of needs that we have in the city, and really doing that with communities is a shift that should happen.
Any other questions? Because if not, we can give our panel here a big round of applause.
Thank you guys for sharing today. Thanks everyone for coming out. We will be back here in 1 week's time talking about the welcoming district. So it's 5:30 next Thursday. we'll see you then.